Okay, this is my second kind of blog video showing you the current state of Democracy 3, which looks suspiciously like Democracy 2 on this screen, but obviously this is old artwork. So I'm just going to point out what has changed since the last video. I've finally got an interface in for actually picking the level, so it should load pretty quick. Of course I say that. Okay, there we go. Right, the first thing is that although this isn't the final graphics, this is more what it's going to look like. So previously the games looked really dark and a bit sort of hardcore and serious, and now it's going to look more like this. It will look much better than this, but this is the first kind of sort of colour test of stuff. So that's going to be more the kind of general look that you're going to have for the main screen, which I think is much brighter and much nicer than it has been before. The tooltips need to be seriously sorted out. One of the other things is you'll notice that the icons aren't all the same size. They used to be all the same size before, and so you'd have up here, you'd have like the foreign policy stuff, and you'd only be able to fit like 3 icons in, and then here you'd be able to fit more in, and sometimes they'd be really small at the start of a game, or if you didn't have many policies. And now they all dynamically position themselves. I can force it to happen by doing this. So if you wanted to mod the game and add another 500 policies and run all of them at once, it would work. They'd just all be smaller, and hopefully this makes it much easier to sort of see stuff and find stuff than it was before. Okay, what else do we have? If I pick on a policy, I'll pick on this because it's kind of like my default policy to explain. This minister picture here is obviously code art that will be fixed. One of the things that has changed is that if you look up here, that there's a lot more information on what being minister actually does. So this minister is 51% effective, which is obviously kind of average. So this shows that you're getting an extra 1% out of income tax because they're in charge, which kind of implies that they're more they're good at closing loopholes and stuff like that. And the implementation time for this is actually higher. As you get a better minister, the implementation time will drop down. So if you've got a really incompetent minister and you're implementing a new policy, it's going to take forever. And if you make changes, it's going to take forever for those changes to take effect. So ministers affect quite a few things about policy, that they are quite important. One of the other things on here is I've changed the way these indicators work. Whereas in the last version you saw that they there was a thick bar and a thin bar. Now there's kind of light and dark, and they overlap. I'm not 100% sure about it yet. So if I just revert changes, this is the current effect. And if I do this lighter bar here is showing what will happen with my changes. If I was to go down, that lighter bar shows what will happen with those changes, and it's less of an effect. And I think that's fairly intuitive. These graphics aren't final; they're just bodged together, and I think that's a kind of clearer way of showing it than I had before, which would get a little bit small. One of the other things with ministers is they actually get a little bit sort of bitter and cynical over time, so they get more experience, so their effectiveness goes up, but they also get shorter tempered. So if you upset the voter groups that they like, they're more likely to resign over time. So keeping your original cabinet together as they become more experienced is going to get harder. Okay, one of the other things, whatever, is that this is kind of like behind the sort of under the hood stuff, and this is the start of a game, so you can't really tell what's going on. But these are all the pressure groups in the game, and some of them are quite harmless. The Human Rights Society is a liberal pressure group, and they're going to sort of write letters and do protest marches and stuff like that. But each pressure group also has a kind of hardcore version. So you'd have the Communist Party, which would obviously socialists and people on the left are going to join the Communist Party, and they're kind of harmless, but extreme people within the Communist Party will eventually make their way through to the Revolutionary Army. And the Revolutionary Army is effectively a terrorist group. So these guys down here, these are terrorist groups. And if you let these groups get too big and you upset the people who are feeding into them, then more and more of them, depending how radical they are, will feed their way through into the terrorist groups, and then you'll get assassination attempts and terrorist attacks and stuff like that. So I guess what I'm saying is you can look at the kind of harmless protest groups and watch them get bigger and realise that you probably need to address that, because they're kind of a recruitment pool from which the hardcore groups are going to draw recruits and then actually threaten you. Okay, but obviously this is all empty at the moment. I've just started a game and nobody's really joined much. There's a few there. One of the other things, if I take a group of voters, I'll take environmentalists, although let's see if I can find someone that's actually got an effect at the moment. Yeah, previously we've had happiness and membership, and you've been able to see the effects on each. There's not many at the moment, but there will be more. And there's an extra thing here, which is income. And this is completely new, that you can actually have policies that affect the income of a particular group. So agriculture subsidies, they obviously make farmers happy. They encourage people to be farmers for obvious reasons, and they also make people who are already farmers wealthier through the subsidies. And the reason that's important is that you will then get more overlap between farmers and wealthy people, and less overlap between farmers and poor people. So it will actually change the demographics of the entire population. So some of these policies now are going to make these little grey bars which show you how many people are in each group. They will change as a result of your policies based on income. So as we kind of expect here, there's a lot of middle income people, actually not too many poor people and quite a few wealthy people. If we're subsidising farmers, then a lot of people in this group are going to kind of also become members of this group. So that means it kind of more accurately represents the way policies are taking effect. And a good example of this is, for example, child benefit is going to make parents wealthier, and child provision is going to make parents wealthier. So if your policy is to kind of like look after sort of middle income and wealthy people and parents and basically screw the poor, you can kind of work towards that by pushing people who you're going to support anyway, such as parents, out of the poor group. Once you've made the parents richer, in other words, they don't kind of care what happens to poor people, because that's not them, even if it's an artificial thing that you've done through sort of state handouts, as it were, and tax breaks. I think that would be quite a major change. It does add a little bit to the complexity of things, and obviously it's quite a complicated game as it goes, but I think it's something that really had to be modelled. At the moment, I think that's all the stuff that's new that you can actually see. There's a lot of kind of under the hood stuff, and obviously things are all in this sort of lighter colour scheme. So this is closer to the final look of the game, and hopefully the next time I show it off there'll be some final graphics, and all of these photo group graphics are being changed as well. Hopefully it's looking better. Cheers.